This video is for anyone who thinks that the NIST report on World Trade Center 7 has ended the scientific debate on how the World Trade Centers collapsed on 9/11. First off, it took 7 years for NIST to write this report, yet they gave the public 3 weeks in which to review and comment on it, before they closed the comment period and declared the report as a final say on the matter. Although the report took NIST 7 years and over 200,000 man-hours of labor to produce the 10,000-plus page report, they somehow felt that 3 weeks was a reasonable time period for a public scientific review of the document. Well, I've just now finished reading the report, and here's a few of the things I found. The Floor 12 fire simulations on page 383 show raging infernos across the entire north side of the building. Yet we have earlier reports and investigations that contradict these upper layer air temperatures depicted in NIST's simulation. L26 of NIST's interim report on World Trade Center 7 states that around 4:45 p.m. a photograph showed fires on floors 7, 8, 9, and 11 near the middle of the north face. Floor 12 was burned out by this time. So we have NIST stating on one hand that Floor 12 was burned itself out at 4:45 p.m. And then on page 237 of NC Star 1-9, NIST contradicts itself with figure 5-152, where they claim that this unknown source photograph was taken at 5 o'clock p.m. and shows 2 fires in the windows that comprise the northwest corner of Floor 12. NIST states that they used shadow analysis to determine the time of this photograph and that it was taken with an estimated margin of error of 10 minutes. 10 minutes using shadow analysis, but they never show this shadow analysis or the error analysis thereof. Not very scientific at all, sorry. The next blatantly anti-scientific and factually unsupported part of the NIST report is the combustible fuel loading on floors 11, 12, and 13. Here we have some very suspicious behavior on the part of NIST. This is on pages 55, 56, and 57 of NC Star 1-9. These pages go over the floor plans and how much burnable material was on each floor. On page 56 in the original public release document, NIST states in paragraph 4, sentence 3, that the combustible fuel loading for floor 13 was described as high by interviewed American Express managers. However, American Express only occupied the southwest corner of floor 13 and were not qualified to comment on the condition of the Securities and Exchange Commission offices on floor 13. Shortly after these comments were submitted to NIST, it changed around a few parts of its report, and the part on page 56 that once said American Express managers now says Securities and Exchange Commission managers. Was that a simple mistake, or was NIST trying to lie and cover something up? Well, if you look at the floor plans on page 56 and 57 of NC Star 1-9, you will see that the Securities and Exchange Commission only had meeting rooms on floor 13. Meeting rooms are like courtrooms, which are sparsely furnished and thus have a low combustible fuel load. So it appears that NIST tried to use the descriptions given by American Express managers for their offices in the southwest corner of the 13th floor in order to lie and say that these sparsely furnished meeting rooms had a high combustible fuel load. When we called them on this, of course they figured it would be easier just to lie again and change American Express to Securities and Exchange Commission. We're going to have to file a Freedom of Information Act to get these interviews with whatever managers NIST is actually talking about. Page 375 of the original, or 376 of the new and revised NC Star 1-9 report, paragraph 1, sentences 8 and 9, says that the density of combustibles on the 13th floor was varied and not well known. So it was assumed to be the same as the 12th floor. What it looks like here is a deliberate effort on behalf of NIST to lie about the fires actually occurring inside of World Trade Center 7. I have already shown that the fires on floor 12 were grossly overestimated by NIST, which then repeated this error on floors 11 and 13, meaning that the error was multiplied threefold. Scientifically, this alone disables their entire argument, not to mention the other evidence I am about to bring up. This casts serious doubt upon the veracity and honesty of NIST's lead engineers John Gross and Shyam Sunder for why they have apparently avoided all normal fire investigation protocols and procedures, and why they would bother to perform a completely pathetic analysis for thermite and explosives. First, NIST assumes that RDX is the only possible explosive that could have been used to demolish World Trade Center 7. They chose RDX because it has a high concussion, which can be heard over a mile away. And then they used this property of RDX to rule out the use of explosives altogether. Secondly, NIST rules out thermite demolition because they claim that thermite can only be used to cut horizontal columns. However, NIST has experts in nanoenergetic compounds, or nanothermites, which have a rapid reaction rate and can be used to weaken or cut vertical columns as well. NIST's failure to investigate other types of explosives and exotic accelerants is in direct violation of the National Fire Protection Association Manual for Fire Investigations, specifically in NFPA 921 Section 18.3.2 on high-order damage, which was clearly met by World Trade Center 7's collapse, as well as NFPA 921 Section 19.2.4 on exotic accelerants. NIST has completely ignored all the evidence for thermite and dismissed the pools of molten iron flowing underneath all three World Trade Center buildings, which was reported by the FDNY, Governor Pataki on CNN, iron workers and cleanup workers, as well as NASA's flyover thermal imaging. Furthermore, Appendix C of the FEMA report shows several diagrams which indicate highly unusual formation of a liquid eutectic, intergranular melting, and erosion of the World Trade Center steel from the collapse. The Section C3 summary report for Sample 1 states that the steel was heated to around 1,000 degrees Celsius, or 1,800 Fahrenheit. It also states that steel liquefied at these temperatures due to the formation of the eutectic, which dramatically lowers the melting point of steel. Whoever told you that the sulfur in the steel came from drywall lied to you. The evidence is right here in the FEMA report. The failure to follow NFPA protocol, the total lameness of the argument against explosives or demolition, and the failure to follow recommendations in Section 6 of Appendix C of the FEMA report, where FEMA scientists say that it is also possible that the erosion of the steel started prior to collapse and accelerated the weakening of the steel structure, stated right in their suggestion for future research. I have asked 9/11 Truth's legal action team to investigate NIST to see if they have broken any state or federal laws which they can be prosecuted for. I would ask that all NIST engineers, architects, and scientists whose names have been included in this report to consider and review these comments and evidence and reconsider their approvals of the report before the entire team is put under investigation. This is not a joke anymore. It's been 7 years since 9/11 and we still don't have answers. The lies stop now. All your debunking arguments and name-calling end here. This is where NIST, or another competent organization, performs a real scientific investigation to show us every tiny detail of how these buildings were demolished by exotic accelerants and proves once and for all the truth about 9/11. NIST was already forced to admit to near free-fall acceleration, seeing as any high school physics student can download the free Physics Toolkit software from physicstoolkit.com and analyze the speed at which all three World Trade Center buildings come down. Another inconveniently unique characteristic of the three largest structural engineering failures in history, which any real scientist will find extremely difficult to explain without controlled demolition. We also have multiple reports of foreknowledge of collapse. This is really strange because according to NIST, A, no tall building in history had ever before collapsed from fire alone, and B, the collapse was a result of a series of accidental and unpredictable mechanical failures. So logically, this collapse should not and could not have been predicted. However, we have several direct media sources who not only predicted the collapse, but announced it before it even happened. The BBC video, of course, but more importantly, CNN's Aaron Brown got a report that, quote, World Trade Center 7 is on fire and has either collapsed or is collapsing. Here's an interesting timeline of events based on CNN. And finally, I can't end this video without talking about the suspicious power downs and evacuations at the World Trade Center which happened the weekend before 9/11, as reported by Scott Forbes and Ben Fountain, and the fact that Marvin Bush and Wirt Walker III sat on the board of directors for the company which ran electronic security for the World Trade Centers. This represents a time window where explosive or accelerants could have been placed inside the buildings by people with direct connections to an administration who has used 9/11 as a pretext for a 7-year crime spree of global proportions. Are you ready for a real 9/11 investigation?
The terrorists attacked us and killed 3,000 of our citizens before we started the freedom agenda in the Middle East. They were... What did Iraq have to do with what?
The attack on the World Trade Center.
Nothing.